In the courtroom, I wore the Medal of Honor. My mother screamed, "You bastard child, take that thing off!" My sister whispered, "You will never belong here." They didn't know a ranger's silence is a declaration of war. My name is Captain Riley Carson. I'm 35 years old, a U.S. Army combat medic with the 75th Ranger Regiment stationed at Fort Hamilton near Charleston, South Carolina. But today, none of that mattered. I sat straight-backed on the hard wooden bench inside the Charleston County Courthouse. The air was thick with the scent of aged oak and Chanel No. 5, the signature perfume of my mother, Eleanor Prescott. She sat across from me, poised in her Oscar de la Renta dress, every pleat perfect, her Mickey Moto pearl necklace tight around her neck like a noose of judgment. Beside her, my sister, Vivian Prescott, corporate attorney and Charleston socialite, flicked her Cartier watch, clearly irritated the proceedings were cutting into her schedule. To them, I was a blemish on their manicured lives. A ranger in full dress blues, out of place among Armani suits and pastel silk. I felt the gazes from the gallery, the familiar faces from the Lancaster Country Club, friends of the family, whispering now like I'd become some shameful urban legend. These were the same people who used to pat me on the head at garden parties. When the clerk called my name, Captain Riley Carson, I rose. The sound of my polished boots echoed on the marble floor like a rifle report in a silent chapel. I walked to the witness stand, the Medal of Honor gleaming on my chest beneath the overhead light. And that's when my mother exploded. Eleanor shot up from her chair. Her voice, usually as sweet as mint julep at brunch, cracked into something jagged and vicious. "You bastard child, you've defiled the Prescott name. Take that disgrace off your chest." Her words sliced through the air. "Bastard child," she screamed again, and the courtroom fell into a vacuum of stunned silence. Even the bailiff froze. Then Vivian leaned in, voice low and venomous. "You never belonged here. Even that uniform doesn't fit you." My lungs locked. I didn't cry. Combat had taught me to hoard tears like rations. Instead, I looked squarely at Judge Callahan, a man whose silver hair and tired eyes had seen too much Charleston drama. I wanted him to see I wouldn't flinch. Deliberately, with the reverence of folding a flag at a comrade's funeral, I unpinned the medal from my chest. I placed it on the polished wood table next to the microphone. The clink of metal on wood was quiet, but in my ears it rang like thunder. That silence was my rebellion. That silence screamed louder than any retort I could have given. Then came the ambush. Vivian's attorney, Warren Blake, a man who oozed country club arrogance, strode forward like a vulture circling its prey. "Captain Carson," he said, his voice slick with contempt, "stands accused not only of manipulating a grieving family, but of unauthorized medical intervention that endangered the life of General William Prescott." He displayed a photo. Me adjusting my father's IV. I remembered that moment. I had just cleaned a pressure sore and changed his saline bag. Warren's caption read, "Unlicensed medical action with possible fatal consequences." They turned my compassion into a crime. They twisted my care into a con. Heads in the gallery nodded. My chest, now bare of the medal, felt naked, cold. And in that moment, I understood something. They weren't just denying my worth as a daughter. They were denying my right to exist, as a soldier, as a woman, as family. They wanted me erased neatly, surgically, from the narrative of the Prescott legacy. But they had forgotten one thing. A ranger never leaves a fallen comrade. And this time, the fallen comrade was me. I sat back down, my hands resting flat on my thighs to hide the slight tremble. My uniform felt tighter than usual, like the fabric itself recoiled from the shame being hurled my way. A man in the back row, a former family friend, I think his name was Richard Bellows, shifted uncomfortably, refusing to meet my eyes. He'd once told me at a 4th of July cookout that my father was damn lucky to have a daughter like me. Now he studied the courtroom tiles as if they contained scripture. Judge Callahan cleared his throat. The sound barely echoed over the weight in the room. "Let's proceed," he said, almost apologetically. But the damage had already been done. No ruling could scrub away what had been shouted. There are things that, once said aloud, settle into the bones. My mother refused to sit again. She remained standing like a specter of Southern elegance, her hands clasped in front of her, jaw clenched so tightly the tendons in her neck strained beneath her pearl choker. I wondered if she practiced this look in the mirror, this stoic martyrdom, just in case the neighbors were watching. She had always been obsessed with image. When I was a child, she would smooth my hair so hard my scalp stung. Whispering, "A Prescott never looks messy, even when she's hurting." But there was nothing neat about this moment. No ironed pleat or polished veneer could hide the rawness now carved into my memory. Vivian scribbled something on her legal pad with her Mont Blanc pen, then leaned over to whisper in Warren's ear. They both smiled. Whatever was coming next, I knew it wouldn't be mercy. As Warren resumed questioning, he held up a printed copy of an old email, one I had sent months earlier to my father's nurse. "In this message," he said, waving the paper like it carried a confession, "Captain Carson refers to herself as the only one who gives a damn whether he lives or dies." He turned toward the judge, eyebrows raised like punctuation marks. "Your Honor, I submit this as proof of emotional instability and hostility toward other family members." When did she start calling me that? The words echoed long after the courtroom had emptied. Bastard child. Was it really today she said it for the first time? Or had she always believed it? The truth? That curse started long before the gavel ever fell. I was 19, home from Georgetown for winter break. I sat on the Persian rug in our formal living room, the one reserved for guests and Christmas cards. My palms were sweaty. I looked at both of them, my parents, and said I wanted to enlist. Not law school, not Capitol Hill, the Army. My father, Lieutenant General William Prescott, the war room legend with silver stars and a spine carved from granite, slapped me. A hard, flat slap that turned my face toward the antique mantel. But the sting wasn't from his hand, it was from his voice after. I'd rather have no daughter at all than one who humiliates me in front of my colleagues. Don't call me father again. My mother didn't flinch. She adjusted the flower arrangement on the fireplace like she'd just heard the weather forecast. I remember thinking, so this is how legacies are protected? By erasing anything that doesn't fit? Vivian was the golden child. She played piano at the Concord Theater, had her debutante ball at the Wexley Club. Her accomplishments were framed in gold and mounted in the hallway like a curated exhibit. I ran 5 miles by the river, fixed up a rusty Ford pickup in the driveway, and preferred cargo pants to pearls. My mother once told a friend during a tea party, "Viv is a rose, refined, delicate. And Riley, she's like a wild magnolia. Resilient? Yes, but too coarse for the parlor." She didn't know I was behind the kitchen door holding a plate of scones. Maybe she didn't care. The worst came on Thanksgiving. It was the first one after I completed medic training. I called the house from a payphone at Fort Sam, Houston. I remember how hopeful I sounded, asking if dinner would be at 6, like always. Vivian answered, "Oh, Riley, sorry. Mom and Dad are out. They decided to spend Thanksgiving at Kiowa Island this year. The house is empty." My stomach dropped. That night, scrolling through Facebook from the barracks, I saw a photo. The Prescott family, full attendance, gathered around our dining table. Even my great-aunt Sylvia, who never leaves her apartment in Beaufort, was there. The caption read, "Warmest Thanksgiving with the whole family." I had dinner that night at a Waffle House off I-26, turkey sandwich, burnt hash browns. A waitress named Bev gave me a slice of pecan pie on the house because she said I looked like I needed it. I didn't cry, not then, but something in me calcified, like if I moved too quickly, it would shatter. Years later, when General Alan Whitaker pinned the Medal of Honor to my uniform on the Pentagon lawn, I thought, for a fleeting second, they might come. My mother had RSVP'd tentative. Vivian never replied, but that day, under a clear Virginia sky, surrounded by men and women who had bled beside me, I stood at attention. My chest rose with the pride of comradeship, not pedigree. A voice in my ear whispered, "She's not here." It was Daniel Rhodes, my unit's former logistics officer, now my closest friend. "She won't come, Riley, and that's not your fault." He was right. But it still felt like a wound I wasn't allowed to bandage. I gave that medal to my commanding officer that night. Told him to hold it for me. Said I'd pick it up when I felt like I belonged. I didn't tell him I wasn't sure I ever would. So there I was, years later, sitting in a Charleston courtroom being stripped of more than just inheritance. I was being cut out of the picture frame. Warren Blake presented a revised will, allegedly signed just weeks before my father's final stroke. It stated that all family holdings would pass directly to Vivienne and her future heirs. Riley Carson, my name wasn't mentioned once. Judge Callahan raised an eyebrow. "Was Captain Carson present at the time this revision was signed?" he asked. Warren cleared his throat. "No, Your Honor, she was deployed overseas." Vivian added, "We tried contacting her, but her location was undisclosed." That was a lie. I had sent postcards, I had emailed, I had even called once and left a message. No one ever responded. They wanted plausible deniability. They wanted the courtroom to see me as a stranger in camo, a ghost wandering into a family saga too delicate for my boots. I leaned back, breathing through my nose. Every breath tasted like betrayal. When recess was called, I stepped outside into the courtyard, needing air that hadn't been filtered through decades of generational resentment. The Charleston sky was hazy, and the breeze off the Ashley River carried the distant scent of marsh and magnolia. It used to feel like home. Now it smelled like a memory I wasn't invited to recall. I stood alone beneath the iron gazebo, the very place where I once held my father's arm during a childhood wedding reception. I must have been 9. He had leaned down and whispered, "Someday, Riley, you'll walk your own path through fire, and I hope to God you wear armor thicker than mine." I never imagined that fire would come from within our own bloodline. From across the courtyard, Eleanor Prescott emerged, flanked by 2 family friends. Her heels clacked with the authority of royalty. When she noticed me, her mouth tightened into a line of disapproval. She dismissed the others with a gesture and approached, stopping just a few feet away. Her perfume wafted between us like a wall. "You could have stayed away," she said flatly. "But you always had to be the heroine, didn't you?" "I came because he asked me to be there," I replied, keeping my voice low. He asked me days before the stroke to make sure things were handled with dignity. "Dignity?" she scoffed. "You have no idea what that word means. Dragging your uniform through this circus, bringing shame to the Prescott legacy." I straightened my spine. "My legacy doesn't begin or end with your last name." She stepped closer, voice like cold steel. "Your very presence taints everything we've built." "No," I said calmly. "What you built was a fortress of mirrors, and now you're furious that one of them cracked." For a moment, her face, so poised and practiced, twitched, just enough to reveal the fear underneath. "You were always too much like him," she whispered. "You mean strong? I mean reckless, sentimental, weak." It didn't sting the way she thought it would. It clarified. I turned to leave. If loving my father and honoring his wishes makes me weak, then I'm proud to be. And I walked away, leaving her frozen beneath that wrought iron dome, a queen without an audience. The second day of court began like a funeral. Quiet, tense, everyone pretending to be dignified while waiting for the next blow. I walked in early, ignoring the stares, my hands clasped behind my back the way we were taught in field briefings. Calm body, clear mind, don't let the enemy see the wound. Vivian arrived 10 minutes late in a navy pantsuit and heels, sharp enough to draw blood. She nodded to Warren Blake and smirked as if this were just another boardroom drama she'd already won. Judge Callahan wasted no time. We'll now hear the video deposition taken 2 weeks before General William Prescott's final hospitalization, he said. My breath caught. The screen flickered to life, revealing my father in a wheelchair, thinner than I remembered, but with fire still flickering in his pale eyes. He wore his uniform jacket, medals arranged neatly, and the oxygen tube rested across his cheekbones like war paint. State your name and intent, the interviewer said off camera. He looked directly into the lens. General William Prescott, my intent is to clarify the succession of my estate and to correct what has been misrepresented in recent documents filed by my legal team. Murmurs broke in the gallery. He continued, my daughter, Captain Riley Carson, is the only one who cared for me during my final months. My son-in-law didn't visit. My eldest daughter was concerned with estate taxes and gala invitations. I hereby declare Riley to be the primary beneficiary of my personal holdings and the Prescott Trust, and I reject any document to the contrary created without my express consent. The screen froze. I stared at my father's still image, and I remembered. It had been raining that day. I pushed his wheelchair out to the sunroom because he hated the sterile light of his hospital bed. He asked me, do you remember that time you broke your wrist trying to climb the pecan tree on Lancaster Lane? I laughed. You made me finish the climb before we went to the ER. He smiled. Because you were halfway there, and I wanted you to know you could finish hard things. That was his last good day. Now, in this courtroom, that same man had just lifted me from the shadows with one recorded breath. Vivian shot up. That video wasn't disclosed in pretrial. It should be inadmissible. Warren echoed. We object on the grounds of authenticity. But Judge Callahan raised his hand. The metadata is verified. This deposition was submitted by Miss Bernice, the family's former nurse, and confirmed by General Alan Whitaker. It stands. For the first time, Vivian faltered. Her jaw clenched, but the fire behind her eyes flickered like a dying candle. The courtroom was silent. But in my chest, it roared. After the deposition played, I didn't move. I couldn't. My father's voice still echoed in my bones, louder than any gavel, stronger than any inheritance. For the first time in years, I felt seen, not as a uniform, not as a scandal, but as his daughter. Judge Callahan called for a short recess. The room emptied slowly, like a sinking ship. I stayed seated, my fingertips pressed against the cool edge of the table, grounding me in the moment. Vivian stormed past me without a word. She was unraveling, flawlessly, of course. Even her anger had posture. Outside in the hallway, I found myself face to face with Mrs. Harper, our family's longtime housekeeper, a woman who had bandaged more scraped knees and broken hearts than anyone else in that house ever acknowledged. She reached for my hand. I knew he'd said it right, child. I nodded, barely able to breathe. He tried. No, baby, she corrected gently. He did. Back inside the courtroom, Warren Blake returned alone. Vivian hadn't followed. He looked smaller now, less sure. When proceedings resumed, he cleared his throat and made a formal request for a continuance, said his client needed time to reassess her legal options. Judge Callahan narrowed his eyes, or to come to terms with the truth. Warren didn't answer. The request was denied. That afternoon, Miss Bernice took the stand. her gray hair pulled back in a loose bun, eyes clear and steady. "I watched Captain Carson care for her father with more love than I've seen in 40 years of nursing," she said. "She washed his wounds, held his hand when he had night terrors, sang hymns when the morphine made him drift too far." She turned to me, and when he passed, she folded his flag and wept into it like it was her only possession. I swallowed hard, because it was. No pearls, no property, no penthouse views, just that flag, just his memory. When Bernice stepped down, several people in the gallery looked away, blinking back something they hadn't expected to feel. It was the kind of truth that didn't need cross-examination. It just needed to be heard. By the final day, the courtroom no longer felt like enemy territory. The tide had shifted, not in loud declarations or slamming gavels, but in glances, in the way people stopped averting their eyes when I walked in. Something unspoken had cracked, and through it seeped the truth. Vivian returned with a calm, practiced expression, but the sharpness in her eyes was gone. Her lawyer sat beside her, quiet, no longer prowling. The Predator Act had run its course. Judge Callahan began with no preamble. "This court recognizes the authority of General William Prescott's video testimony. The revised will presented by the plaintiff is invalidated, and the original beneficiary designations are restored. Captain Riley Carson, by both testament and witness, is awarded full rights to the Prescott Trust and associated holdings." There was no applause, no gasp, just a silence that felt sacred. My mother didn't look at me, not when the ruling was read, not when the papers were signed, not even as I stood and turned to leave. But as I reached the courtroom doors, I heard the clack of her heels behind me. Outside, under the soft Charleston sun, she called my name. I turned. She stood alone now. No entourage, no Vivian, no rehearsed poise. Just Eleanor Prescott, shoulders squared, pearls still around her neck like armor that no longer fit. "You were always his favorite," she said, "even when he tried not to show it." I said nothing. Not out of malice, but because I no longer needed to fill the silence for her sake. She stepped closer. "Do you hate me, Riley?" I looked past her toward the Ashley River. The water moved slow and wide like time itself. "I did," I said honestly, "but that's not what I'm carrying anymore." "What are you carrying then?" "His memory, the truth, and the knowledge that I survived you." She blinked once. The words hit her like a gust of wind she hadn't braced for. Then, without another word, I walked away. My boots echoed on the courthouse steps, not in shame this time, but in purpose. I wasn't just leaving a courtroom. I was leaving a legacy I no longer needed approval from. I didn't return to the Prescott estate, not to claim rooms I was never welcomed in, not to sort through heirlooms that never held my name. I let the lawyers handle what they must. I kept only what mattered. My father's watch, the flag from his funeral, and a journal he left tucked behind a box of medals. The first page read, "To Riley, my anchor in the storm." That was enough. I moved into a small house just off the marsh, quiet and open, where the windows breathe salt air and the floorboards creak like honest memories. I spend my mornings with coffee on the porch and my nights writing letters to soldiers still deployed. Not all wounds are visible, and not all healing is loud. Some days I still wear the medal, not for them, for me. Because it reminds me that I didn't just endure. I rose. They tried to erase me from the story, but I carved my name in the parts they didn't own. I'm not the bastard child. I'm the daughter who stayed, who loved through silence, who showed up when no one else would. And when people ask me now who I am, I don't say Prescott. I say Carson, Riley Carson, Captain, combat medic, daughter, survivor. And when I walk through Charleston, I do it with my head high, not for pride, but for peace. Because I finally learned that peace isn't the absence of conflict. It's the presence of truth. And in that truth, I am free.